of general structure in terms of findings, which will help us to apply those research question findings into different contexts, so that each time we are applying, we will have, uh, we can compare. It will be easier for us to compare the findings in different contexts, so that each time we will apply into different contexts, the findings will become more rich. So it will be more rich, and at some point it will be saturated. There will be a saturation in findings. That means we will find the same kind of findings. Okay, so that is called the generalizability. So that is actually, let's come to the next point. So research question, research problem statement, that will definitely guide the literature review. For example, in my case, the role of managers in building dynamic capabilities in the IT companies in Bangladesh. So definitely the role of managerial roles in capability building. So that is the literature I need to review. Then I need to come up with some kind of theory. Okay, so what sort of theory, or what is the appropriate theory that is relevant for my research question? So in my case, I picked, it is called dynamic capability theory. So I adopted that one. And based on the research question, so definitely what you will ask, you will get answer for those. Okay, so if your question is correct, if you can frame your question in a manner that is actually answerable, okay, that is actually measurable, and that can be applied in a context that is appropriate for the research question, definitely we can define our contribution in a better manner. Okay, so the contribution can also be very clear, and finally it will help us to prevent the scope drift. That means we can focus, the research findings or the research direction will be focused. Okay, it will help us to stick to the same direction. Okay, so we can manage those research scope drift, and that is also helpful. So this is a research funnel. So we start with a broad interest, then we come up with a topic, then we come up with a problem statement, then gap, and then research question. Okay, finally, so that is, one way, but we can also, when we have some sort of, what we can say, understanding or insight about the research topic, this problem gap question can be parallelly done. Okay, in a way, when we have already insight. Normally, these broad interest and research questions should be, there should be some kind of, what we can say, alignment. So the topic should also be directed by some kind of interest. So that interest can also be considered as a question, inquiry. Okay, that is actually giving us the direction for the topic, problem, gap, and research question finally. So this final research question is actually a revised question. So sometime what happen is, when we start with some kind of broad interest and broad research question, when we do some kind of study, when we go for the literature review, or actually reviewing the some study that has been done on the same context with the similar kind of research, based on those insight and understanding, we may need to revise the research question a little bit. So this is when with the gap is identified, the final research question will be the final research question. So it is based on some revision if needed. So if we consider some qualities, what is the research question? It has to be clear, it has to be focused, it has to be answerable, it should be, it should address a gap in the knowledge, theory informed, and significance. So what these all of these things. So if we consider what is clarity, so definitely the research question has to have some sort of clarity. So clarity means, I mean, if we consider what is opposite of clarity, that is ambiguity. So it shouldn't be something that has some sort of confused or uh, say ambiguous type of question that doesn't make sense. Okay, so it has to make sense. Clear means it has to be, there should be a very clear relationship between the concepts or the ideas within that question. So it has a focus and it can be answered. Okay, so if we follow some kind of method, if we apply some kind of method, and if we apply and follow that research methodology, there should be an answer. Okay, and it is addressing a gap in the knowledge. So what is that? So it is not sufficient for a research question to be clear, focused, and answerable. Definitely to be able to considered as a legitimate research question within the research community. I mean, within a in a PhD study or a research study that aims to publish in a top kind of journal or a reputed journal, we need to identify the research gap. So that is actually related with the research gap. Okay, so based on the literature review or study, we need to identify there is a gap in this particular area, and that research question should have some kind of connection to address that gap. So theory informed and significance. So it has to be, there should be a significance of that research question. So if we find that answer, there should be some kind of advantage. If we find that answer, so we have some kind of value, and that is significance. And theory informed is, I mean, we say what I mentioned, that in my PhD study, I followed dynamic capability theory. So if we adopt that theory, and if we find out this research question, I mean, the answer of this research question, it is actually informing that theory as well. So how is that? Because that theory is when I did my PhD in 2017. So I started in 2011. It took me, I mean, 6 years. And so during that time, I mean, when I actually did the research on that theory, so there is no or very little study that actually applied the dynamic capability theory in the context of a developing country. Then in the context of IT industry. Okay, so there are some study that actually adopted on the IT companies, but that is in the developed country. So that is the gap, and that is where we can consider that this study actually informing the theory, and it is also informed by the theory. So it is actually guided by the theory. Okay, so that is one thing. So let's get back 1 minute. Yeah. So let's go to the next slide. One minute, I'm having bit issue with the thing. Let me stop sharing and restarted that. Okay, it is here. Okay, so let's move on. Martin, can you see me? See my slide?
Yes, I can. Yes, that's perfectly
Okay,
okay.
all right. Okay, so here there is an example between what is, weak versus strong question. So here the example in the weak question is what is leadership? Okay, so that is a very broad question. I would say that is very open-ended question. It can be very, it can be anything. Okay, it may have different kind of meaning to different kind of participant on the or different kind of domain in the discipline. I mean, it can be say uh, in the education, it can be one thing. It can be different in politics. There can be different kind of approach or perspective we can define leadership. So it is actually what I will consider. It is very broad and it is that way. It is too broad. Okay, so in when as it is too broad, it is definitely it is not answerable. Why is that? Because in a PhD thesis, in a PhD study, as we already mentioned, we have to determine a method. We have to carry out the method by developing the research instruments such as, survey, interview question or something. So what is leadership? When we will ask this question, then we will have a diverse kind of answer. Okay, so then we will face difficulty to actually make those answer, uh, present those answer or convert those answer in a manner that is actually consistent. Okay, so it will have a very heterogeneous kind of findings, I would say. So here we can see, how we can convert that kind of question. So our inquiry or interest is in leadership, definitely. So what is a better research question? So how does transformational leadership influence employee motivation, employee innovation in hybrid workplace? So here you can see our question is how the transformational leadership influence employee innovation. Okay, so this is the independent variable and this is the dependent variable. So how this is actually affecting transformation leadership, affecting employee innovation. What is the context? In hybrid workplace. Okay, so that is the research question. So if we can, when we will find out the data or when we will kind of set our context, we can make it more specific, like in hybrid workplace for finance sectors or education industry, or in that manner we can make it more specific. Okay, so but still, so that is the general empirical inquiry where which actually is guiding the key research goal, the objective, okay, the aim that will fulfill the research goal, objective A, and aim, and that will actually help us to build that research design and framework. So types of research questions. So one is exploratory, descriptive, explanatory, predictive, evaluative. So say let's make it the first one, exploratory. So exploratory means, when say in my case it was exploratory. So exploratory means there is very yeah. Any question? Hello?
No, just carry on. Someone had their microphone open.
Okay, all right. So exploratory, when we talk about exploratory, that means there is very less knowledge in the literature or in the existing study about the context or the about the research question that we are going to study. So that means we have very less guideline. Okay, we have very less knowledge, we have very less kind of information. So we have to explore. So there is very limited starting or initial understanding, initial insight. So we have to explore the knowledge. So that is kind of exploratory. On the other hand, descriptive is like we are kind of gathering, or we are kind of, uh, explicating insight regarding our particular research, the subject. Okay, so descriptive can be, say, it can be, say, if we consider uh, the type of managers. Okay, so the how managerial role in building dynamic capability in the IT sector in Bangladesh. So that is, due to the context of Bangladesh, it become exploratory. But if it is a developing country context, so that is not there were actually studies in that. So how we can make it descriptive? Okay, so we have to make it descriptive in that way. So uh, what are the ways, okay, how managers actually help building dynamic capability. So descriptive can be the method of their capability building process. We can be descriptive in the population of the managers that are actually building capability and that are actually not building capability. Okay, those who are engaged or related with the capability building, not engaged with the capability building. So those who are actually engaged in the capability building, what is the demographic qualities or the demographic characteristics, features they have? Say, for example, in the US, so now you can see a number of US companies, they are actually the CEO or top management is from India. Okay, they are Indian. So that is kind of a demographic description. Okay, so how it is possible for those companies, those are based in US. So some immigrant is actually coming to US and they're joining the company, and then after a certain time they become the top management. Okay, so that is, so if we consider, a research question, what is the qualities, characteristics of those top management, Indian background heritage or in Indian background top management in US IT companies, then it become a descriptive. But if we question how these people actually achieving that success, then it is a different kind of question. So it can be an explanatory question. So if we want to explain, okay, so why there is a dominance of Indian origin top management in the US IT sector. Okay, so it requires some kind of explanation. Okay, so that is a explanatory research question. Predictive. So predictive is some sort of identifying some sort of kind of variable, some sort of features, key insight that will help us to predict something. Say like how it will, say like flood, natural disaster. Okay, how we can have a better prediction. Stock market, how we can have a better prediction about how the market will react. Okay, so these are, predictive kind of a research question, these trying to predict something. Okay, some phenomena, some event, some kind of it can be some kind of performance outcome. So we may need to predict which employee or which type of employee, which employee with certain demography or characteristics will have higher retention, okay, or higher turnover. Okay, so that is kind of a predictive. Evaluative is when we are evaluating some kind of some performance or some event or some kind of insight that is already accepted, okay, but or it is unknown. Okay, so there is kind of an evaluation that we are actually going on. Okay, so that is evaluative. So let's move to the next. Source of research question. So one is theoretical limitation, practice problem, policy changes, contradictory evidence, and emerging trends. So what is theory limitation is that so when we talk about some adopting a theory, so in this case, in my PhD, I adopted dynamic capability theory. So dynamic capability theory, every theory has its own scope. Okay, so it has its own limitations. So limitations means the boundary conditions. So theory can actually do two things. One is it can explain, another thing is it can predict. So the dynamic capability theory was the challenge was, I mean, the one limitation was it was predominantly developed from the organizational point of view, organizational perspective. So dynamic capability is the capability that is actually organization level capability. So when I developed my research question, I mean, when my question was the role of managers in building capability. So that is the one challenge. So from managers, we are developing capabilities. So the challenge is you can see it is very complex to establish the linkage from one individual towards a organization. So we call it say like causal ambiguity. Okay, so there is like lot of I mean the bigger the organization and the more hierarchy or the functional unit we have, it will become more difficult to establish that linkage. So this is a limitation of I think the theoretical limitation is not properly theoretical limitation, but if we adopt that theory, it became a limitation of that theory in that particular context. So practical problem. So practical problem is say like in considering the context of Bangladesh. So it is actually uh, it is a country that is very next to India. Okay, we have large number. I mean, very large border with India. So it has a historical association with India. And the the inside is, I mean, although India is a very successful country in the global context in the IT, Bangladesh is not that much. I mean, its performance is very low in compared to that. So normally, I mean, if the neighboring country is doing something very good, and that from the demography and all other, I mean, there are different contexts. It has a lot of similarity, but it is not performing well. So why is that? So it is not true that government didn't do anything, but there were a lot of initiative by the government, and there were some companies that actually started in the IT business in the late 80s, but they failed to grow after a certain scale, certain size. So that is a practical problem. So why it is happening? Where Indian IT company is growing 100,000 employees, Bangladesh IT companies is struggling to grow after 150 employee. So that's a big problem. Okay, so definitely there is some problem. So there is the practical problem that is actually informing us, helping us to have some sort of, I mean, guiding or developing some sort of research problem. Okay, research question. Policy challenge. So policy challenge means, say, for example, if we consider the misinformation. Okay, so let's talk about recent some examples. So there is a misinformation. Misinformation is a policy challenge right now. So in the social networking site like X, then Facebook, then as well, I mean YouTube, I mean media sharing. So you can see there is a an influx of new type of video that is created by the AI, and that is actually very, very difficult to identify. Okay, so they are not real. They are actually made by AI. And the problem is if you actually if the person who is uploading, who is sharing, that particular video with some kind of malicious, okay, I mean harmful message, then it is actually harming someone. So how to tackle that problem? Okay, so that's a real problem. So there is real implications. Okay, there is real harm by having this kind of content, we can say, that has some sort of bad or wicked intention. So definitely policy people, I mean, say, they have to intervene. Okay, so there is a lot of debate in the UK recently, the UK recently regarding this kind of thing. I mean, there is a incident happened with X. Uh, so policy actually want to intervene. They want to have a better policy. They want to have a better rule. Okay, they want to have a better law to regulate some challenge. Okay, so that is the context. I mean, policy challenge context that is actually helping us to have some sort of understanding. Yes, that is a problem happening there. So there can be a very good research question from those that area. Contradictory evidence. Contradictory evidence is, say, for example, if we consider this same example, so we can say that the platform, I mean, Facebook, X, other platform, they are saying that they are doing their best. They are doing something that is actually helping the platform to reduce that thing. But on the other hand, we can see that the government or the people or the user, they're saying that it is actually increasing. So that then we have some kind of observation made by two different stakeholders that doesn't actually have a convergence, rather that have has a different kind of claim that contradicts each other. So there definitely a kind of a research scope is over there to mitigate, to overcome that gap gap between two observation and have that to find out what is actually the real truth. Emerging trend. So there is always some sort of new problems. When the COVID is actually started, we have phenomena of that remote learning, remote workplace. Okay, this became the emerging trend. So there is always some, say similarly like the misinformation. That is an emerging trend right now. So always there is some sort of something happening that is newly started. So that is actually emerging trend for and that can be that is a very fruitful area for doing research. Okay, so let's consider the ontology of the social science. So nature of the reality. So what is reality? What is reality and what is truth? So these are very deep question. These are the philosophy behind this research method. So what is objectivist and constructivist perspective? So here, I mean, if we consider these two things, so objectivist ontology actually there is an assumption then that the knowledge is objective regardless of the changes in the reality. Okay, so knowledge can be objective and that objective knowledge can be identified. So if we go and if we do some kind of research, we can find an objective knowledge. Whereas constructivist perspective doesn't believe that there is an objective knowledge exists. So the assumption behind constructivist perspective is the knowledge has to be constructed. Okay, so it is the perspective, it is the interpretation, it is the interaction between the researcher and the reality that help us to construct the knowledge. So here the constructivist perspective, knowledge is considered as subjective. Okay, whereas the objective point of view, knowledge is objective, it is absolute. So you can see here what is the alignment of the research problem, research question with this kind of ideas, I mean, these perspectives. So when we have the positivist, say like objectivist, that is a positivist angle, that actually become quantitative research questions. So here why we are quantitative, what we mean by quantitative is we are kind of measuring something. So it has to be a positivist mindset where we assume that something exists objectively and it can be measured. Then we can go for quantitative, uh, approach. Whereas the interpretivist approach is qualitative. So there we are not measuring, rather we are capturing kind of uh, different perspective from the subject, from the participant. Okay, so that is actually interpretivist uh, angle. So that is actually the method will be qualitative. And when we have the pragmatist approach, we will have the mixed method. So we can also have the both of the method in a same research question. I mean, same research study, not question. So we have different question for different kind of approach. So what is, quantitative study, the question should start with what? Okay, simple. The question start with what? So what are the factors affecting the accident in the highways in Australia during the winter season? That's a quantitative. Whereas, how the drivers in Australia overcome the challenges of driving in the night time during winter season. Okay, so that is a qualitative question. So normally the qualitative question starts with why or how. Okay, whereas the quantitative question will start with what. Conceptual framework. So visual representation of the relationship among construct. So if we consider now, if we go back to here, so the question we started with, the transformational leadership influence the employee innovation in hybrid workplace. So now here when we will have a conceptual framework, so we have this transformational leadership in one side, that is then there will be an arrow going on to employee innovation. The context is hybrid workplace. So that is a very basic conceptual framework. Okay, so the box that we have transformation leadership, when we identify some sort of underlying variable within that transformation leadership, we can add those variables or variables within that box, and also what we mean by employee innovation. So when we can put some kind of more inside or more variable within that, so then we will have a more informed research conceptual framework. So I'll give you an example from my PhD thesis. So theoretical versus conceptual framework. So theoretical framework is based on established theory, and whereas conceptual framework is researchers proposed model. Okay, so that is obvious. So that what is just we have discussed. So that is a conceptual framework. So then still we have to align. We have to that this is called role play or interplay with an existing theory to convert when we will have some kind of data, some findings, some kind of observation, and when we'll have put those insight within our research, within our conceptual model, and following some underlying theory, we can convert that conceptual model into some kind of theoretical framework later. So variable, that is independent variable, dependent variable, mediator, moderator, control variable. So there can be different variables. So here in our example of that research question, transformational leadership is an independent variable, where the employee innovation is a dependent variable. So we can add a mediator. Mediator is that is actually going through that. So if we consider that uh, transformation leadership is going through, say, like what we can consider, say, like employee empowerment. So it is going through employee empowerment. So that is mediator. Employee empowerment is mediator. Whereas the moderator is when, if we consider employee empowerment is actually facilitating the connection between transformation leadership and the employee innovation. Control is when we have two different kind of experiment. One is we have some kind of, we consider the control variable, so that is actually will help us to distinguish the changes in the other variable. Okay, construct versus variable. So construct is the abstract idea and the variable is a measurable form. So just now we have considered the transformation leadership. So that is a construct. But variable is when we can contemplate that construct into different item. Okay, so what we mean by transformation leadership. So in that particular research context or scenario, we have to validate that transformation leadership actually exists within that context. So we need to validate that the employee or the manager, they have some sort of capability of transformational leadership. Then we can actually go for identifying the influence. We have to we have to find out whether there is kind of phenomena of employee innovation conducted by employee. So that is why the empowerment is needed. So variable is, whereas the it will, yeah, there can be some kind of scale 1 to 7. So we will determine that transformation leadership, say there is kind of uh, high employment authority given for the employee to initiate changes. So that is a transformational leadership, so one item. So 1 to 7. So if there is 7, that means it is highly, strongly present over there. 1 means there is it doesn't exist. So that is how, we were applying the scale, we actually measure the variable. Operationalization. So when we, that translating that concept into measurable indicators is actually called the operationalization. So here, once we find out or once we settle with some kind of variable, there are already previous studies that actually did some kind of operationalization. So we can take from ideas or items from those study, and due to considering the changes in the context, we can always add some more ideas, more item into our operationalization process so that it become more accurate to our context. So now we will talk about what is a research gap. Okay, so it is actually the missing knowledge or the unresolved issue in the literature. Okay, missing knowledge means what we don't know. That means basically unknown. Okay, and unresolved issue means still there is debate on that particular area, whether there is no, the researcher or the expert or the scholar, they haven't settled with some kind of position within that area. So that is actually unresolved issue. There is more debate is going on. So types of research gap. So one is theoretical gap, methodological gap, empirical gap, population, contextual, contradictory. So we talked about the contradictory one already. So theoretical gap. So theoretical gap is there is always some kind of there is always new theories coming in, and there is always old theories that is uh, that is getting more advanced. So why there is new theory? Okay, so why we need new theory? So if we ask that question, so if we already have a lot of theories, why still we have new theories? So that is because the existing theory always have some kind of limitation. Okay, so they can explain certain things, they can predict certain things, but still they have some kind of limitation is in their scope that they cannot explain, they cannot predict. Okay, so that is the theoretical gap. Okay, so that is a theoretical limitation. So we can always do more research to either uh, contribute to the existing theory to overcome those gaps, or we can create new theories where which are more uh, capable, okay, to explaining or in predicting. Methodological gap. Methodological gap is, say, for example, in terms of misinformation. The if we consider the misinformation, it is not easy in terms of methodology how we can, I mean, solve the problem. Okay, so if we want to do some sort of research, it become challenging from the methodological point of view. Then empirical gap. Sometime what is happening is there is a research question, but the problem exists. There is theoretical gap. It is perfectly fine. The research question is perfectly fine. But from the empirical point of view, that means from the research design, research carrying out point of view, it is very challenging. Okay, so that is a gap. So that is why there can be very less research into that kind of area. Population is, say, kind of a different population. There is research on certain area and the demography of a certain population. Say, for example, say in the COVID. Okay, so in the COVID, different country have different kind of fatalities. Okay, in different countries there is different kind of death rate, survival rate. So if we do some research, so definitely the research findings from USA may not be applicable in Africa. And in Africa, it may not be applicable in Asia. So that is the population of the subject. I mean, that is the fact. Then contextual. Again, in the same problem, I mean, the COVID problem. So there is contextual difference. Okay, so contextual difference means, say, like that is lockdown. Okay, so there was lockdown. So lockdown was a uh, response from the government, okay, to mitigate the spread of the disease. But lockdown has faced different challenges, okay, because in the developed country they have a lot of money, so there can be some sort of incentive to the population, okay, so that during the lockdown they provided incentive to the people who are not working, and the government and also private sector actually keep those people paying their salary or some sort of financial arrangement so that they continue receiving money. Okay, and they have better infrastructure so that the lockdown process, all when it happened, it was possible to deliver the foods and everything. But in a developing country, the consider there's a lot of population, they actually live by daily living. Okay, so they actually earn every day and they have to buy their foods every day. So those population actually, if not supported by the government, then it is not possible for them to sustain in a lockdown situation. So that is the contextual difference. Contradiction. So contradiction is when there is a disagreement. When we what we can see disagreement, when there is a kind of a debate. Okay, when there is kind of lack of completeness. Okay, lack of completeness means any statement or any position is not kind of fully supported or sufficiently supported by the evidence or empirical or other observation or findings. So that is a contradictory situation, and in that kind of situation, there is always we can consider the research gap is there. And finally, what is temporal? Temporal is, I mean, we have done some research in some context, in some kind of research domain. Say, for example, in my, if I go back to my PhD study, that is the role of managers in building dynamic capabilities in the IT companies in Bangladesh. So I have done that in 2016. 17. I collected my data in 2015. So it has become now 10 years. So that is a temporal research gap we can consider because the findings is based on 10 years old observations. So it may not be relevant in present day. There can be a lot of changes. There can be a lot of, factors that emerge during these 10 years time. There can be a lot of change of practices. Okay, so that is a temporal research gap we can consider. So let's move on to next one. Theoretical gap. So theory not applied or incomplete. Methodological gap. New method or new approach is needed. Contextual gap. So is it this one? Yeah. We already discussed this. So contextual gap theory is not tested in new settings. Contradictory evidence gap, conflicting findings in literature. So now method, what are the method we can identify the research gap? So one is systematic review. So then there is scoping review, meta-analysis, and citation analysis. Definitely, when you guys will go for the study, PhD will get into more on this method. So each of these method can be one kind of one whole class. So systematic review is I will discuss a little bit. Systematic review is when we have the problem statement, research question very clearly identified, then we actually conduct review into those domain. Okay, so I have already told you, like from my PhD student, the role of managers in building dynamic capabilities. So I have done review in dynamic capabilities, the role of managers. Okay, so when you do this kind of review, so what is the how to do a very good systematic review? There are thousands of articles. If you go for Google Scholar, there can be thousands of articles. But my recommendation is always go for there is ABDC journal ranking. So that is in Australia. We follow that ABDC journal ranking. So there is A star A journal, then B C journal. So always try to find out. Download article that is from A star and A and from last 3 years. So if you do that, then you have very high quality ingredients, content, and recent. So that is very important. So high quality content and very recent content. These two are very important because if you go for articles that is published in a poor quality journal, then you will have, I mean, they have a lot of limitations in that study. So they have a lot of limitations. Their findings is not strong enough to have some sort of conclusion. They will be weak. So those are the limitations. So you cannot build something on very weak foundation. Okay, so you need very solid, you need very strong evidence, and you need high quality evidence. So there is always what we will consider top quality journal and very recent journal. So if you consider any one of these, systematic review, scoping review, so all of these are kind of similar. Citation analysis will apply some sort of tool, that is citation analysis tool. Meta-analysis is basically when you capture some study that have some sort of kind of measurement over there. So you analyze their measurement. Okay, so that is the meta-analysis of each study, and you are actually doing an analysis of the analysis. Okay, so that is why it is called meta-analysis. Scoping review is kind of you come up with a very structured keywords. Okay, the searching keywords, and you are actually searching that set of keywords in every journal. Okay, in a manner that you are finding extracting information. So that is kind of a scoping review. So all of these, systematic review, scoping review, meta-analysis, site analysis. So what is I mean, the basic goal of this? So basic goal of this is to follow a process that is repeatable. Okay, that is replicable. So that means if you do some kind of review, if that is just a review, we don't know how you have done it. Okay, so if you follow some kind of process, so that will help you to update your review. Say if you're doing PhD, it will take some years time. So maybe when you have done your systematic review, then you are writing your thesis, then it's already been 1.5 years. So you have to do review for that 1.5 years only. So if you follow a process, then you can actually update your review following that process. So that is the advantage of having a systematic method underlying that reviewing thing. So when it is the gap is that what those existing study they actually told that they haven't found. There should be research on that particular area. There is gap in that area. So each article will actually tell some sort of a kind of some guideline or indication about what they have done, what could have been done better, what they have done that actually have some sort of limitation, or what their future study can actually they should do this, that. So that is there is kind of explicit type of guideline. Okay, so that is the research gap based on literature. Okay, so we have to give citation of those gap. So what is the advantage of having those gaps? So I will tell you that, yes. So let me show you how we can identify that. So this is a gap identification matrix. So what we can do is, what generally we do. So when we start doing the literature review, we create a table. So in that table, in the study, we write the reference, we write the little bit of context of the research question in the context, method. So what is the method? Key findings and limitations. So once we do this for a number of article of the article that we have found, then we have a very good identification. Okay, so what is the gap? So it's a, very good method. It's a very good starting point. So focus on the limitations and future research section. Okay, so when we read the literature to identify the gap, we have to focus on the limitations and future research section. So turning gap into research questions. So once we identify the gap, then we can formulate the research problem in a more specific manner, in a more, practical manner, in a manner that is actually have good connection, good alignment with the existing literature, and we can identify the question. We can develop the question. So from question to aim and objective. Okay, so aim is the overall purpose, objective is the specific steps. So here again, we have some sort of criteria. What we can tell that how much original your research question is. Okay, feasible from the point of view of carrying out the research. Okay, so if it is sometimes the research question is very good, but it is not feasible to carry out. Significance is the, sometimes the monetary value, sometimes the research, significance. So those sort of thing we have discussed. Say why my PhD thesis, why I consider it significant, because the neighboring country, India, there is their yearly export in IT industry is around 150 billion, whereas Bangladesh, having a lot of population, still couldn't reach 1 billion. Okay, so there is a significance. Okay, so if we can uh, identify the process of or the role of managers in building capability, especially dynamic capability in that particular context, we can identify that how much these companies is actually uh, capable to pursue innovation. adaptability. Okay, that is the significance. Clear is clarity, and theory linked is we already discussed. I mean, what is the whether the theory or whether the research question can be evaluated, okay, answered, or uh, a perspective, a theoretical perspective can be adopted effectively. So that is the theory linked. So what is common mistake? I mean, so we already discussed, I mean, too broad, that is, we have already discussed that it is not good to have a very broad kind of question. And sometimes if it is very specific, I mean, too much narrow, that is also not, I mean, not appropriate. Method driven. Okay, so our research question should be there should be some kind of empirical inquiry. There can be some kind of methodological innovation, definitely, but uh, that is not the research question. No theoretical grounding. It has to have a theoretical grounding. So it has to have a connection with the theory. So that is theoretical grounding, and it is necessary. Ethical consideration. So ethical consideration is, I mean, say, when we will go for collecting the data, definitely there can be some risk involved. Okay, so we have to identify the risk, we have to disclose the risk clearly. Okay, data sensitivity. When we do research on some kind of health sector or the in the context, so there can be we have to deal with the sensitive data of the patient. So that is a sensitive. So we have to maintain some kind of confidentiality at all times. Power dynamics. Power dynamics is, say, like when we are going to reveal some kind of truth, when we are trying to going to answer something, we are trying to reveal some sort of truth. Okay, so truth can be different for different hierarchy. So if you go for a top management and ask them their responsibility, they will not accept their responsibility into some kind of poor performance of their organization. So that is a power dynamic. So we need to be careful. We need to be very uh, strategic. Okay, we need to understand that it is not a confrontation. Okay, so if we confront that, what is your why you failed? Okay, why you failed to do that or do that? So that kind of question or that kind of approach uh, will not make the participant comfortable. Okay, we need to make sure that participant remain comfortable at all times so that they become free, they become willing to share more insight, more information, and we to make sure that uh, they're safe. Okay, their identity will be always de-identified, so there is no harm for them. Okay, so that is very, very important. So now we can see the problem. We have discussed problem. We have discussed the gap. We have discussed the research question, framework, method, and finally the contribution. Okay, so once we have identified the research gap, there is actually we are making the contribution. So the problem of not having a research gap fully identified is that you cannot claim the contribution is confirmed. Okay, so our claim, I mean, when we do some research, when we do some sort of, when we have some sort of findings, then we claim that we have some sort of contribution in certain research domain or certain research areas. So if the gap is not identified, we cannot claim that. Our claim becomes open. So this is the research kind of a skeleton. So from problem, gap, question, framework, method, contribution. So there should be an alignment across all of this. Okay, so that is extremely, I mean, needed, necessary. So now, I mean, say what we have discussed. So let's discuss about one case study. So topic is hybrid world. Gap is limited research on RDT formation. I mean, because it's a very new phenomena. So what does hybrid work shape professional identity? So how does hybrid work shape professional identity? So that is a research question. Okay, so you can see, that is what we can see. Hybrid work is a recent phenomenon, so there is definitely some kind of gap over there, and we have some sort of question. So, how does hybrid work shape professional identity? We can add some kind of industry here, some country here to make it more specific. So, that is kind of one example. Okay, so good research begins with good question. Okay, gap ensures originality. Okay, also contribution. So originality means the contribution. Alignment ensures the rigor. So if we consider that this alignment, if there is no alignment or if there is lack of alignment, then your research will suffer. Okay, so it will suffer from the uh, rigor point of view. So these are some recommended readings. Okay, so there is a lot of books and articles you can find on this topic. So now let's start the discussion. So before going into discussion, I want to show you my research for a few minutes. Okay, so then it will be useful. So this one. Okay, here. So here, you can see, I will show you. So this is the acknowledgement publication list. Introduction. Okay. So context of the empirical inquiry. Okay, so this is how I will discuss my chapter one. Then you have a better understanding about how to formulate that problem statement and the research question. So you can see starts with the context of the empirical inquiry. Okay, so I discuss the context. Then I go for the motivation behind undertaking the study. Okay, so what is my motivation? So motivation was my background or something. So now it is research gap and aim of the study. So here you can see when I started my research, it was written during 2012 or 13. So I have some latest literature from there. So there is these research agendas offer promising research avenue. So this is the theoretical research gap. At the beginning, what I have provided, that is a theoretical research gap. Then you can see managers, that is my more research query, empirical query. So I'm now talking about the managers, challenging, sustaining superior performance. And then I have talked about the manager role in the building organization in the context of developing countries, Bangladesh. So that is how I formulate the research objective. So you can see the objective of the research is the influence of managerial roles and attributes in building organizational dynamic capabilities in ICT companies in Bangladesh. The various organizational factors that facilitate and constrain managers in building dynamic capabilities in Bangladesh, ICT companies in Bangladesh, and the consequences of dynamic capabilities. So from there, I have transforming those objective into research question. So here you can see the question: how do managerial attributes and roles influence building organizational dynamic capability? So I become uh, more specific here. Attributes and roles influence building organizational dynamic capabilities. So within that question, I can have more question. So here, based on the literature review, so this is what I said. You can start with this question, the question number one, but when you do your literature review, you have more insight, you can have a revised research question. So, based on literature review, I found that managerial cognitive abilities, social capital, human capital, and ambidextrous role affect. So, I have those sub research question over there. Then, in the second research question, I have how do organizational factors in building organizational dynamic abilities. So, here I have, based on the literature, I have found two factors. So, I mentioned that organizational structure and organizational culture. And finally, what are the consequences of building dynamic ability? So you can see, so these are the research question, research method, uh, general information about the studied work, research findings, contribution, limitation, organization of the thesis. So I want to show you how that research question actually linked with the framework, conceptual framework. My conceptual framework is coming. So organizational factors, research gap. After that, there is conceptual framework. So you can see here, uh, if I, so conceptual framework. So if I do this, how can I make it zoom? Here. You can see, so what I mentioned, I mean, my research question and this conceptual framework is actually is guided by the research question. You understand? So even if I don't do that research, this literature review, you can see this is exactly what my research question I asked. So here, only thing is here you can see sensing, sieging, reconfiguring within that organizational dynamic abilities, organizational level. This is coming from the theory. And finally, this is the consequences. So here the individual level, managerial attribute and managerial role, how it is affecting the organizational level dynamic capability building. So what are the dynamic capability I'm focusing on? Because there can be many dynamic capability. So I am restricting my scope into sensing, sieging, reconfiguring. And then what are the factors? Here you can see in the framework, it is coming organizational structure and organizational culture. And finally, by on the most right hand side, I have the consequences, positive, negative, no relation. So this is the conceptual framework. Okay, so I think that is that should be the. I mean, I hope that you have that insight from that this thesis particularly. So I'd go for Martin. Should I go for the question and answer session? Yeah, Martin.
So Martin, you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I was just saying, I think we have to wind it up about half past. Um, you had about 15, 17 people who actually attended the webinar itself.
yeah.
Considerably number of others have actually attended via the streaming side of it, because I've been watching the streaming side of it as well. So a lot of students are actually taking the opportunity just to actually go to YouTube and look at the stream version.
Okay, okay.
There's two or three people here at the moment still left, but I think particularly with the examples that you've been giving, they have been very, very useful in terms of understanding the detail under the titles, because quite often we just see the titles. So I was very, very pleased with that. But
Okay, thank you so much.
thank you very much, Doctor, for your time
Okay.
and for your effort. That was a good presentation, and it is arguably the most difficult part of actually doing a PhD, getting that question right.
There is a question,
And
right? Absolutely.
yeah,
Because if the question
so
is ambiguous, then the whole process becomes they struggle throughout the whole
yeah,
process.
but thank you
I
very, very much.
have I have I have a comment here, if possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so Doctor, just to introduce myself, I'm the head of the doctorate program at the GNU, and
Okay.
I want from you because we already have you here with us today, and as Mr. Martin mentioned, many of our learners they attended, and a few of them they took it like live streaming, and
Yeah.
some of them because of different time zones they're gonna to look to the recording after that. I need from you kind of an advice at the end of this session, and that advice on how learners they can transfer their PhD or DBA topic or questions into different paper for publications. Because learners they will be investing like almost 2 or 3 years. They will invest for their doctorate journey, and sometimes they will get lost there, and they will just concern onto completing it without another important concern actually, which is publishing papers. So if I can have an advice from you to our learners on how they can get benefit or use their doctorate questions into publishing, I would not say one paper because for sure you cannot convert one doctorate
Hmm.
level like to one paper, but how they can convert it to maybe few paper are useful for publication or
I mean, if
conferences.
I
So
if
that
I go
advice
for
will
no, absolutely. So if I share these my thesis again, so you can see there is different. I mean, this is very challenging. It is not easy to bring paper out of research the thesis because thesis is written in a monograph style. You understand? So there is a lot of kind of explanation, elaboration is there because it is like 100,000 word. So here what we can see when you have this kind of question ready. Okay, so if I want to make a paper out of my thesis, so I will try to make this as a paper, this question. So I have to focus on one research question and their underlying question. So then what will happen? Say here if I consider the managerial attributes, so this research question, if I consider this research question, so what will happen is I have literature review that covered this research question, these constructs. So if I go for these literature review section, so this is section 3. So here you can see the research literature review section 1.1, 1 point, here it will be literature review section. So I will not go into details. So here you can see in the literature review section, there is a section called managerial roles and attributes in building dynamic capabilities. So that particular section you have to take out from your literature review. So here there will be, this section is going for the research question 2. Consequence, this is going for research question 3. So this similar manner from your research thesis, what we have to extract for that one particular question, what is the relevant content throughout the thesis? That is number one step. I mean, if I say like once they finish it, then what they have to do, I mean, you will find out a kind of a document that is, say, like 15-20,000 word document. Okay, the method will remain same. Method will remain same. Now, then what we have to do is, I mean, the student has to do, they have to update that literature. They have to brutally get rid of the content that is old, that is not good enough. You understand? I mean, when we start doing a research PhD, there is some kind of emotional attachment with what we have, what we write. It becomes difficult for us to delete it. You understand? And those are the legacy thing we carry out because we think that, I mean, student thinks that is good. And I mean, those can be good, but those become old. You understand? I mean, when you start doing your PhD, then if it is 3 years old, when you finish your PhD, then it becomes 6 years old. So that is one thing you have to, I mean, what I just mentioned today, I mean, one is top quality journal and recent journal. So they have to review again from those lens what they can get rid of. So once they get rid of, then they have to fill that content again with, they have to do a literature review again. Unfortunately, this is true. And that is why most students cannot actually publish. You understand? You have to do that again. Because how you have to do it, now we have to, if we go for strategically, when you find out, when you identify that I want to publish in that particular journal, so you have to include a lot of reference from that particular journal. So first you have to update the literature review based on recent, again, last 3 years, so that your research gap is again validated. It become contemporary, it become updated. Then if you have find out that that is the journal I need to submit or I want to publish, then you have to go for that journal. You need to find out what are the articles, what are the research has been published in that particular journal and how I can relate with that. So once they have done these two things, then I think it will become a very good shape. Okay, then you have to just revise. You understand? So these are two very important things. One is they have to go to a review of the last 3 years research again, targeting the top journal, and then they have to go for a review of the journal they want to submit and to connect them. Okay, so these are the two things, and you have to get rid of a lot of things. I mean, you have to be because the top journals, they are very lean. They are not very it's not that it's too much, or it's a, I mean, quantity wise, it's a big amount of work you need to produce. Rather, it is very targeted. So it has to be a kind of a bullet. Okay, it goes to exact target. So it has to be lean. Okay, so the problem of having a PhD thesis approved, ready, or passed is I mean, from the student point of view, I think that all of my write up is actually high quality, but that is actually not true. So we have to accept that. You understand? So we have to then again evaluate, assess our PhD thesis based on the top that journal's expectation, their quality. So best way to start is, I mean, whatever journal I want to publish, you should take 3 journal example from there. And then you go by copy, I mean, go by page, paragraph by paragraph, section by section, line by line. So then you have a very good first draft. So it's not like out of your mind. So because every journal has their own template, own style. So that is, then it will become compatible. So that is this, where we should start with. Then you will understand. I mean, then you will automatically get rid of a lot of things. Okay, and then you revise and kind of come up your own writing style if it is possible. It is not easy to have distinctive writing style at the beginning. So definitely we can have some kind of, if we follow one or two, then it will become some kind of your own. Okay, so that is, I think that is my approach. I think it is some, I mean, we published, I mean, in that way we publish something. It is very helpful.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. And I hope our learners, they'll take that advice to, as we mentioned, like to have more papers to publish and how they
Yeah.
can transfer it. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
over to you,
much.
Mr. Martin.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time. Okay. Goodbye, all.
Thank you
Okay,
so much.
thank
So I will
you.
end the session here. Or Martin
Yeah,
will.
I think we'll end the session now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
doctor. Thank you. Have a
Yeah.
good day.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.